Jewish Americans were not alone in the fight on behalf of their beleaguered co-religionists in the Soviet Union. Intercommunal partnerships were critical to the success of the movement, and one of the most famous non-Jews to speak prominently on the issue was Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Let's hear his words now from December 1966.
These challenging words affirming the interdependence and interrelatedness of all mankind are particularly relevant when we think of the plight of 3 million Jews in the Soviet Union. No person of goodwill can stand by as a silent onlooker while there is a possibility of the complete spiritual and cultural destruction of a once flourishing Jewish community. A denial of human rights anywhere is a threat to the affirmation of human rights everywhere. While Jews in Russia may not be physically murdered as they were in Nazi Germany, they are facing every day a kind of spiritual and cultural genocide. Negroes can well understand and sympathize with this problem. When you are written out of history as a people, when you are given no choice but to accept the majority culture, you are denied an aspect of your own identity. Ultimately, you suffer a corrosion of your self-understanding and self-respect.
Anti-Semitism and racial prejudice still pose clear dangers to the Jewish and African American communities in the United States today. The only way to fight these disturbing trends and to build a better future is for communities to work together for positive change as they have in the past. To help rekindle these bonds, we can look to a prime example of Black-Jewish partnership from the 1960s. One of Martin Luther King Jr.'s top Jewish partners in the civil rights movement was Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, whom King described as a truly great prophet. Rabbi Heschel fled Poland prior to the Nazi invasion and immigrated to the United States, and was an active participant in the civil rights movement, famously marching with King in Selma in March 1965. Today we have with us Rabbi Heschel's daughter, Dr. Susannah Heschel, an Eli M. Black Distinguished Professor of Jewish Studies at Dartmouth College. She will share with us more about her father's relationship with Martin Luther King Jr. and his work on Black-Jewish relations during the civil rights movement. Professor Heschel, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and such an honor to meet Natan Sharansky, even only in Zoom. My father first met Dr. King in January of 1963 at a conference on religion and race in Chicago, where each one gave a keynote address. And somehow they met, and even though they came from such different backgrounds, they came together, they bonded. And I think what brought them together was the prophets, the Bible, the spirituality that was so important to each one of them, and to causes of moral justice for our society. My father and Dr. King immediately started giving lectures together. They spoke to Jewish groups and to college groups, and when they did, Dr. King immediately began speaking on behalf of Soviet Jews. My father was involved in the Free Soviet Jewry movement very early on, and I actually remember the first time my father was to give a lecture on behalf of Soviet Jews. My mother was reading his speech before he left the house, and she said, "You know, you're going to get attacked for this." And my father said, "Yes, I know," because the general atmosphere at the time was shah still, be quiet. Don't speak out as a Jew on behalf of other Jews. Let the government handle this, or it should be handled privately, silently, quietly, behind the scenes. But my father spoke out, and Dr. King spoke out. And I think that their voices were so important. Dr. King brought his support for the Free Soviet Jewry movement to the Black community, especially to Black churches. And he made it so clear that freedom for one is freedom for all. We all have to live in freedom and justice. And he also understood what was so important for my father, which was that Soviet Jews were being deprived of the opportunity to learn Hebrew. It was illegal to learn Hebrew. The opportunity to daven, to practice Judaism, was forbidden. To daven, to pray to the Kadosh Baruch Hu. So for my father, this was wrenching and terribly painful because, of course, it reminded him of what he had experienced in Germany when Hitler came to power. So it was a very crucial issue for my father. And I think in many ways also Dr. King helped us as Jews, because one of the mottos at the time was "Black is beautiful." And Jews felt, yes, and being Jewish is also beautiful. And we too should be marching for our rights and not hiding and not pretending or somehow keeping quiet about issues of great moral importance. I mentioned also that when I was a child, Elie Wiesel, who at the time was not yet married, he was single, and he lived a few blocks away from us in Riverside Drive. And he used to come over to our home on Shabbat afternoon. You know, after we went to shul and we had lunch, my parents would take a nap, and then in the afternoon, my father would go for a walk with Elie Wiesel. And I know my father encouraged him to go to the Soviet Union, and he came back and wrote this extraordinary book, The Jews of Silence.
If we stand together, I think we can overcome almost anything. Thank you, Dr. Heschel. Another issue.
I want to
Would you like to respond? Of course, Mr. Sharansky.
First of all, thank you, Dr. Heschel. It was so moving and so important to hear, because what you just now said, I heard it so many times from some American Jews who are coming to help us. And they were saying how they participated in the protests in Atlanta, in bus demonstrations, how it was called, that but they were sitting in the buses together with the black people in order to express their solidarity, and because with Martin Luther King, and how it helped them to recognize, to understand that it's okay to fight also for your own identity. That's part of universal cause. Absolutely. You know, for many Jews, it was very important to understand that while fighting for their people, it's not against universal values. That's in support of universal values. And that's why it's very important that it worked really both ways.
All right. Well, Dr. Heschel, another issue close to your father's heart was the plight of Soviet Jewry, and he was a prominent advocate on their behalf until his death in 1972. We actually have an excerpt of a speech he gave in 1963 in the movement's earliest days. Let's take a listen.
For so many years, a systematic process of liquidation of millions of Jews, of spiritual liquidation of millions of Jews, is going on in Soviet Russia. It is above all, and first of all, at this moment, a central religious concern to me. How can I call myself a Jew and remain indifferent to the extinction of so many Jews, of the spiritual extinction? Remember, there is no other people in the world which is so absolutely committed to the sanctity of human rights and the equality of all men as our people. Our history is the most emphatic testimony that injustice to some men spells the doom of all men. We will get the support and the public support from the Protestant and Catholic leadership, from the Negro leadership, in our effort to help save the Russian Jews from complete extinction. One of the tragic failures of the ancient Judaism, I repeat, was the indifference to the 10 lost tribes. Let us not repeat that terrible sin. I would like to spend the next 3 minutes by saying to you just a few words in Yiddish in honor of the Russian Jews, most of whom still speak Yiddish. Mir fiel noch als dem Sätze den Kopf. Es dürft sich, als der Himmel über uns zerfällt in Stücke. Wir haben noch als die Teufels gewesen, den Bruch und das Unglück, was hat uns getroffen. Wir sind noch als wie Fardeleweihe. Noch nicht geregt, sich setzen, Schiffe. Zu Tumult, zu Brochen, zu Mischten versteinert. For so many years.
Dr. Heschel, just from watching your reactions during that, I could tell it was an emotional experience for you to hear that. Now, can you tell us a little bit more about this speech, your father's message in Yiddish, and his advocacy on behalf of Soviet Jewry?
So this is just a few minutes in Yiddish at the end of a lecture that my father gave. He was together with Martin Luther King on that occasion, and it was a lecture to the United Synagogue of America, which is an organization of lay conservative Jews. And he spoke in Yiddish, and I actually think that there are many ways in which the civil rights movement made Jews, young Jews, but all Jews think we also have something, an ethnicity that we want not to be ashamed of. You know, Charles Silberman, the great sociologist, wrote a book called A Certain People, and he described in 1950s, Jews would hide their Jewishness. They would get a nose job. Children would hide their Hebrew books when they went to public school and so forth. And after the civil rights movement, that ended. Jews felt very comfortable expressing. But what my father says in this speech, and I think the impetus, you know, it comes from my father's own experience of having lived in Nazi Germany, of having struggled to bring his mother, his sisters, his family out, and he couldn't. He couldn't get them visas to come here. And he said, you know, in this Yiddish speech, we need to say Kaddish for our souls, because it's as if our souls were hardened, as if our conscience went up in flames in Auschwitz and Medina, along with their bodies. How can it be today that we still light Shabbos candles, we still continue with our lives as if what? As if nothing happened? So for my father, the horror was translated into action. What do we need to do as Jews and as all human beings? All of us. And he felt a tremendous imperative to rescue the Jews from the Soviet Union. And he spoke about this as a spiritual annihilation, a spiritual extinction. He wanted to rescue them the way he had tried to rescue his family from Nazi Europe. The Jews in the Soviet Union were losing their Jewish identity, which is so important to my father, and the religious identity, which to my father is the core of being a Jew, Torah and mitzvahs, and Ahavas Hashem, and love of God. And that's what Jewish education, by the way, should be. That's the core of being a Jew. And then we stand up, and our voices should be loud and clear.
All right, a lot of important points there. Thank you, Professor Heschel, for those fascinating insights. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much.